Good morning once again, and welcome to the Kennebec Valley Chamber of Commerce Business Insider Breakfast Seminar. We're very pleased this morning to have a STEM champion, S-T-E-M. I'll explain S-T-E-M in just a second. Dr. Jan Mokros is our speaker this morning. She is Executive Director of the Maine Mathematics and Science Alliance here in Augusta. She'll discuss the efforts to increase aspirations and improve performance in K through 16 in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, STEM, the STEM education. She is also co-director of the Reach Center, which we'll be hearing more about, for developing science and math talent in Maine's 10 to 18-year-old students. Jan's background is in informal science and math education, curriculum development, educational research, and evaluation. She's published books for parents on how to do math with their children. She sees a need to vastly increase the number of students in Maine who develop deep and passionate interests in STEM in order to propel Maine's economy forward. We thank sponsors for today's program, Kennebec Savings Bank and Central Maine Power Company. It is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Jan Mokros.
Well, thank you, Peter, for that introduction, and thank you for the introduction to STEM as well. It's a term that's been around for a while, and we really do want to think beyond science and math because these fields are burgeoning and certainly include a lot of technology and engineering positions, advanced manufacturing, composites, all kinds of things that really are emerging very quickly. I also want to introduce Joe Gates, who is my colleague at MMSA, Maine Math and Science Alliance, another acronym. And so we're going to be talking for the next few minutes about what's the nature of, some people say, a crisis in STEM education, and what can we do about it, and what can people in this room do to help? The issue is that we really aren't educating enough STEM workers here in Maine or in the country, and even with high unemployment, what we're finding is that jobs in these areas are going begging. And these jobs pay a lot more than other jobs. Many of you work in businesses that involve STEM and probably are frustrated with the lack of workers who are available for some of these jobs. So the situation in Maine, I just wanted to give a brief example. In 2011, we have about 4,300 people coming out of the University of Maine system each year, graduating with a BA or BS degree. And of those 4,300, about 46 majored in computer science or information technology. So that's about 1%, and about 30 more majored in math. Okay, so we have 76 altogether. Now UNM by itself hires 100 people a year for jobs in these fields. And in Maine, there's probably at least 500 jobs in these fields each year, it's been estimated. So where are we going to get these workers? As some of you know, it's very hard to get visas for people to come in from other countries. We can get workers and do from other states. But why isn't Maine graduating more people who are prepared for its workforce? Some people have called this a Sputnik moment, and those of you who are old enough remember in 1957 when Sputnik was launched by the Soviet Union, there was an outcry in this country. People said, why aren't we in the US able to do this? Why is Russia getting ahead of us? I don't know if we're in that kind of competition anymore, but certainly we are falling behind in terms of the quality of STEM education that workers are getting, but more importantly, even at the advanced levels, we're just not anymore producing the best and the brightest, or enough of the best and the brightest in STEM fields. So what happens is if we can't get enough workers, companies leave the state or set up satellite divisions elsewhere, as some southern Maine companies have done, and then People leave to get jobs elsewhere, and we say, what happened here? It's a vicious cycle. I want to talk a little bit about the roots of this problem. In rural areas, there are, because of sort of the sprawl and the spread outness, there are certain issues that we encounter. One thing is the classes. We don't have as many, the variety of classes in STEM areas at a high school level, say, that you would in other places. Now that's improving because there are virtual high schools around. And those of you who've been following that movement, you can take courses from MIT or Stanford and do that from your own home. So that is changing. In terms of math and science teachers, here in Maine, if you teach up through 8th grade, it's very valuable to be a generalist because you're likely to teach at a small school. If you can teach social studies, English, history, math, and science, you're very valued. But how does a person master all of those areas? So what we find is the minimum qualifications for teaching, say for being a science teacher, 8th grade level, think about how many courses you might need in college in order to do that. Well, the requirement here in Maine is you have to have 2, okay? To be a science teacher, you have to have had 2 science courses yourself in college. I think a lot of us, as part of our general ed requirement, had 2 science courses. Same with a math teacher. Math teacher would have to have 2 math courses, and that can include courses that are called methods or how to teach math. So in high school it changes and you need to have more. You need to have 8 courses. But a lot of times we find that through middle school our teachers aren't as prepared as we need them to be. The other thing is that in terms of community resources here in Maine, we have a lot of them. We'll be talking about some of them. They're a little more hidden. And there aren't the big, massive Boston Museum of Science or the big aquarium. So there's not as many out-of-school resources for kids. Talking about out-of-school experiences, a recent study has shown that in urban areas, if you control for income, family income, what we're finding is that kids in rural areas are about half as likely. This question was, did you have one experience outside of school in the last year that involved science, technology, engineering, or math? Could be going to a club, participating in a robotics competition, going to a museum. That counts as one experience. And so you can see among students who are, they call them plain rural living states. I guess they wanted a catchy acronym. But that there's, by 9th to 11th or 12th grade, there's only 11% of kids who've done one of those in the last year. And this was a huge survey of about 17,000 kids and their parents nationwide. So the blue graph lines are struggling urban core. That means they live in the city and don't have much money, but they're still able to get out and be involved in some STEM experiences. So there is some good news. I'm going to try to intersperse pieces of good news in this talk. And one of them is that elementary school kids are very engaged in science and math. And they love it. They'll often tell you science or math are their favorite subjects. They also, if you ask them how good do you think you are at math or science, they'll say, yeah, I'm really good at it. Unfortunately, it doesn't always match with how good they are, but they do have a lot of confidence. And this continues through about 6th grade, that they like it and they're confident. 2 crucial ingredients. But at middle school, they start losing interest. By high school, there's a dramatic change. Most kids and their families feel that math, science, technology, and engineering are important. They're important for society. We need educated workers. But they don't feel that they could do those jobs or that they want to do those jobs. In fact, 41% of them say they'd be unhappy if they had to take a job that involved these fields. If they had to take a job that involved deep water offshore wind or producing, making robots, doing manufacturing, being involved in biomedical work, they'd be unhappy. But, when I said all those careers, they don't actually know about them. I think the reason they say they'd be unhappy is that when you ask them, they say that they can only say the names of 2 careers that involve STEM. And the most common ones are doctor and scientist. So it doesn't go very deep. I mean, and then you have to start, kind of pulling at them to get more. You can put words in their mouths, but spontaneously there's only 2 that they will typically say. So that is a problem. We need people to be more aware of these jobs. Just briefly, I'm not going to read through all this, but where do our students stand? Where do U.S. students stand, actually? And international studies that use pretty sophisticated assessments of what kids understand about science show that among our 15-year-olds that we in the U.S. rank 24th out of 41 countries. Those are some of the countries where kids are doing better than our kids here in the U.S. So this is a problem. It's below the median, below the midpoint here. Okay, well, what about Maine? Maybe Maine does better. Now, we find that Maine ranks 28th in the U.S., so we're a little bit, we're in the bottom half, but we're close. We're kind of in that middle area. And this is a somewhat different study where they're looking at what percentage of kids score at the advanced level, and this study was in math. The reason that they wanted to look at advanced level is because, of course, that's where a lot of our really good talent's going to come from. That's where the people come from who are going to be working at programming jobs at UNAM or working at Habib's lab up at UMaine. So we need to look at kids who can score at the advanced level. 5% of our students do. Now, this weekend I took a little trip to Canada, and I remembered as we were crossing the border that 15% of Canadian kids score at the advanced level. And wondered why that is. Why is it that, you travel past Jackman and get into Canada and, not all of a sudden, it's not that easy, but you have 3 times more kids in Canada scoring at the advanced level in STEM fields. This is just a graphic, sort of reminiscent of the Electoral College map, but not really. So what you see here is Maine's an outlier within New England, and that our neighbors, 3 of the top, 3 out of the top 10 states in science and math are in New England. Vermont, Massachusetts, and Connecticut all have pretty good numbers. In Massachusetts, 11% of kids score at the advanced level. Okay, now I'm going to go back to good news again. We do have some signs of change. Engineering is attracting a lot more young people in Maine. Especially at UMaine, and we're finding a lot more women going into engineering. So a group up there, Engineers Without Borders, that is really attracting a lot of people to use engineering to, to solve real problems, to save the world, to make a difference in the world. And engineering has increased at the fastest rate of any of the majors up there. Here, closer to home at UMA, we find 26 kids. Well, maybe Greg knows whether this is the exact number or not, but I heard this a couple of weeks ago, involved in computer science IT this year. And this